and welcome to the last historical happy hour of 2023. And I'm with my dear friend, Lynda Loigman. I'm so excited to end the year with her book, The Matchmaker's Gift, because it's amazing. And it is a great Christmas and Hanukkah present too. So it's just, I'm so happy that she's here. She's a little under the weather. I hurt my back, but we're going to power through this.
Exactly. Between the two of us, we're like the walking, like illness, whatever, but we're okay. I am so happy to see you. So like,
Thank you.
after I say goodbye to you, I'm probably going to curl up and fall asleep. But right now, I'm super happy.
We're going to make it through. And then I'm going to be on the couch with my heating pad and my dog.
You'll be with your heating pad. I'll be with my NyQuil.
Right. But yeah, that's your happy hour cocktail, your NyQuil tonight.
Oh my God. If I had a glass of wine right now, I would be passed out. I would be snoring.
So thank you for doing this despite not feeling well. I'm going to jump in with a quick intro. Lynda Cohen Loigman grew up in Longmeadow, Mass. She received a BA in English and American Literature from Harvard and a JD from Columbia Law. Her debut novel, Two Family House, was a USA Today bestseller and a nominee for the Goodreads 2016 Choice Awards in Historical Fiction. Her second novel, The Wartime Sisters, was selected as a Women's World Book Club pick and a Best Book of 2019 by Real Simple magazine. The Matchmaker's Gift is her third novel, and it was named a Best Book of Fall by Parade, BuzzFeed, New York Post, and People magazine. And I loved this book. And it's so funny. I was at a book club the other night, and I said that I was talking to you Thursday on this webinar, and someone was like, I just finished that book and I loved it. And I said, I know, it's delightful. And I'm so excited to talk to you about it. So tell everyone about the premise of this novel and the story about how you were inspired to write it.
Sure. So this is my first dual timeline story. So this is a story about Sarah, who comes to New York in 1910 as a young girl. And she's an immigrant. She lands on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and she quickly discovers that she has this gift for seeing people's soulmates. And then it is also about her granddaughter, Abby. And Abby's timeline takes place in 1994. And she's very inconveniently inherited this gift. And it's inconvenient for Abby because, of course, she happens to be a divorce attorney. So this idea that she is seeing soulmates sort of without being asked to see them, she doesn't want this gift. And it's really kind of jeopardizing the career that she's worked so hard to build. So this was my COVID book, like
yes.
Books that you're talking to people about now. All the COVID books are out now. And so I wrote this book. I was actually working on a different book when I started to write this book. And I got a call from my daughter. Jane and I talk about our kids a lot. So I got a call from my daughter, March of 2020, crying. They just sent us an email that we have to leave the dorms. They're shutting down the school. So she was on her way home and she said, could I bring my roommate? And so my daughter's name is Ellie and her roommate is Adele. And so of course we said yes, because we wanted them to have continue the school experience a little bit, because they were getting sort of cut off early. So a couple things happened, which sort of led me to write this book. And the first thing was when they came home, I had triple the number of women in the house. I was living with my teenage son and my husband and my dog, all of whom are men. And when the girls came home, it was like we had a whole different dinner conversations, and we were talking about women's issues and women in the working world and like things they were facing at school with guys and just things they were worried about. We talked about my career and like things that I had faced, and we very quickly came to the conclusion, of course, that things had not changed as much as we wish that they had changed in all the time since I was working and I was their age. And then so that was kind of in my head, which is why when people read the character of Sarah, she's such a strong woman and she's fighting for her place in the professional world that she's in the world of matchmakers on the Lower East Side. And so they really inspired me, Ellie and Adele, and I dedicated the book to them because
I saw that. Yes.
really like those conversations with them that put me in the headspace to write Sarah the way that I wrote her. But then the other thing that really was the main impetus for a matchmaker story was we were binge watching like everybody was doing, and our first binge watch was Indian matchmaking, which is a great Netflix
Love that show.
Too. And when we were done, Adele turned to me and said, "You know, my grandmother was an Orthodox Jewish matchmaker in Brooklyn." And she pulled up this article on her phone, an article from the New York Times in 1977, and it had this huge picture of her grandmother. And it just like, there was something about that article, the way it was written, just the idea, like, I was like, you know, I think that would be like, what a great story that would be, a matchmaker and a granddaughter. And like, I don't know. I kind of couldn't get it out of my head. And so I told my agent about it, and she became really interested in it right away, called me the next day, wanted to talk to my editor. And they kind of all decided that I should put aside the book I was working on then and start the Matchmaker book. But of course, you know, like, I'm not a romance writer, and a matchmaking book sounds an awful lot like romance, but I write historical fiction, which is why I get to be on your show. And which is why, you know, that was my first like big hurdle. Like, how am I going to come at this from a historical standpoint? What time period am I going to use? Like, what's it going to be? So that was like the first big like question that I had to face.
Excellent. Yeah. And you know, when you that's actually leads to my next question, because I have never written a dual narrative. I find them very intimidating, and you did it so well. And was the intention to always write a dual narrative, or did you figure that out along the way? What were you thinking?
So I had never done it either. Um, it was just, I don't, I, it was just this idea that I wanted to write about the granddaughter having this other career. So I knew that there would be two timelines. Like, I really wanted to write about Sarah, and I really wanted to write about Abby, but I didn't want to do that tropey thing that happens a lot where it's like present day, and then somebody finds like a piece of jewelry from their grandmother, and then there's like these little short flashbacks to the past.
Right.
I wanted it to really be full, two complete arcs, and I wanted them to have a relationship in the present, which is the 1994 timeline. Like, it's not the present; it's the recent past, which they do. Like, Sarah is in Abby's story too, and so the only way that I could do it is sort of the way that I go at all of my books, which is to write it in the order that you read it. Like, I cannot write one timeline and the other timeline and then mix them up together, you know, braid them together.
Yeah.
I have to do it in exactly the order that you read it. So that's what I did. And it was really hard because it was almost like writing two separate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Susie Orman Schnall just commented, said it's easier. You only have to write two half books, which is kind of
Yeah.
true.
I mean, it's easier in that, yeah, it's like two shorter stories, but they still have to be complete stories. Hi, Susie.
Complete arcs, complete story. Yeah.
Susie.
I know. Hi, Susie. Thanks for being on. So the other thing that was interesting for me, like I loved your other two books, but this one has an element of magical realism that your other two books didn't have. And I'm just curious if this was hard for you to do, and you incorporated it so well. Like, it was just enough, you know. And how did you figure that? How did you do it? How did you figure that out?
I struggled with the idea of it for a long time because, look, like, you know, you've been writing a bunch of books. All of us who've written a bunch of books know that it's very hard to pivot. You don't want to switch genres. The publishers want you to stay where you are, to bring your readers with you. There's a lot of issues with pivoting this way or that way. This book for me was like a nice sort of turning in a direction that I've wanted to go in, because I love books with magical realism. I love, like, people who know me know, like, I love that Addie LaRue book, and
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
I love every Alice Hoffman book, especially the ones that you know, that have magical realism in them.
Yes.
I love all those kinds of stories, and to me, those are like the stories that comfort me, that I want to curl up with. Those are what I love. So to write that was like very intimidating because I didn't want to mess it up. And I knew that I couldn't just jump in and just write a fantasy book, which is not really what I want to do anyway. I don't want to write a fantasy book. But I do have a lot of respect for people who do that. It takes a lot of world building. So this book was like just enough of it that I could like stay in my lane, but like just add a little bit of something different.
Right.
It was hard. I mean, it was I don't know. It lent it, love is always a little magical, right? So like it lent itself to it, but I was very careful about it. And I tried not to put too much into it. I was really worried about it. I sent the book to my editor when I was about halfway done to see, like to make sure that she thought it was working. Because there was enough of it by the halfway point that I've just really trusted her. And I knew if she said it was okay, then it would be okay.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, no, I loved the way that you incorporate it. It was subtle and believable. I loved it. So another question I had, because I heard another interview where you talked about this, the setting and the details of life in New York in the 1910s and the 1990s are wonderful. And I heard, I read about your notes. I read your notes in the back about the research. I heard an interview. So tell me about the extensive research you did, particularly the details that capture the Lower East Side Jewish immigrant community in the 1900s.
So I couldn't go anywhere. Like I wanted to go to the Lower East Side, but I couldn't because it was the early days of COVID when nobody was like, I would never have gone into the city at that point. But there are a lot of resources online, which are great. So I turned to the New York Public Library and the Jewish Museum and the Museum of Jewish Heritage online. The Tenement Museum online had great,
Oh, yeah.
and then the museum at Eldridge Street. So the museum at Eldridge Street is, for those who don't know, it's like a very old synagogue on the Lower East Side, which is still there. It has these amazing stained glass windows, and it's just a really neat place to go visit. But they had an exhibit online called Love on the Lower East Side, which was
Oh, nice.
fantastic. Yeah. So and that exhibit referenced this wedding, which was like the led me really to picking this time period. So, because at that point I was still like, okay, am I going to write about the 1950s? Am I going to do the 1970s? Like, what time is Sarah going to be in? So, that Love on the Lower East Side exhibit referenced this wedding that took place in 1909. And that was the wedding of this woman, Edith Karp, and her father was called the Pickle Millionaire of New York. So, he's the inspiration.
Amazing.
He was the inspiration. And that wedding had like 2,000 people, and it was on Rivington Street. The police had to come to like keep the crowds, organized. And it was just this fascinating article for a lot of reasons. First of all, it blew me away that like the New York Times in 1909 is writing about an immigrant wedding, like an Jewish immigrant wedding. Like that seemed very odd because it seemed like, okay, they would write about society weddings, but this was definitely not a society wedding. It was a huge wedding, but it was not a society wedding. So that was one thing that caught my attention. And then the other thing was this really weird line in it that was like, this wedding was not like an arranged marriage. It wasn't made in the usual way with a shadchan, which is the Yiddish word for matchmaker. So I was like, what is the New York Times like using Yiddish for? Like that.
Oh, I love it.
That was really odd. And then there was also this wonderful line, which somebody like deserved an award for, the reporter, which was the scent of orange blossoms and roses at this wedding mingled with the odor of dried herring and pickles. So that's the line that like, I have pretty much memorized by now. But when I read that, I sent it to my editor and I was like, this is what I want this book to be. Like, I want it roses and pickles. Like, it's going to have these romantic elements, but then these gritty Lower East Side elements. And that helped me. When I read that, I was like, okay, this is my time period. 1909, 1910, that's when she's going to first start her matchmaking. And that's when she's going to be growing up. And there was also like, when I saw the Yiddish word in the New York Times, I did a search for that word like in the New York Times archive because I was like, what's with this word? I hadn't even heard it before. I didn't know that word at
Oh,
all.
really? Oh, wow.
I hadn't heard it. I mean, I'd heard of a shidduch, which is a match, but I hadn't heard of a shadchan. So I did a search for it. And when I did the search, this other article came up, which was from 1910. And it was like, rates for husbands on the rise. And it was this really neat article that said that at that time in New York City, there were over 5,000 professional matchmakers, and the bulk of them were men. So that article was like just like gold,
Oh,
because
yeah.
all of a sudden I know that. And then I'm thinking about all the stuff that I talked to Ellie and Adele about, right? Like all those conversations we were having about working women. I was like, okay, this is a woman. She's up against all these men. They're going to be resentful. And this is what it's going to be like. That's it's a man's world in this career, even though we don't think of it that way. We think of it as a thing that women do, but back then, no, it was men mostly. And she's going to be doing it, and she's going to do their job better than they can, and they're going to resent her for it. So that handed me like everything on a silver platter. There was my conflict, like there was the story right there.
Oh, amazing. And I love that you were collaborative with your daughter and her friend. Like, how cool is that? Like, so did you run things by them throughout the process or
Not really. No, I mean
no?
Adele speaks Yiddish fluently. So
Oh,
Adele
wow.
actually like I would check some Yiddish with her. Like I'd be like, Adele, what would a person say here? What would, you know? And she read the book when it was done for the Yiddish stuff. Um,
Excellent.
and my daughter, like Ellie wants to go to law school. Like, you know, Ellie and Abby is very ambitious in the story, and my daughter is very ambitious. So my daughter was some of the inspiration, you know, for Abby. Um, but no, I didn't really run things by that. Like the story, I don't really run my story choices by anybody. Like my story choices are just my choices.
Yeah,
And
same. Yeah, yeah. I feel like it like you ruin the mojo if you talk about it too much. There's something about that yeah. Yeah, I keep it to myself till towards the end, and then when you feel like it's ready to share. Yeah. Yeah. So do you do like Sarah and Abby and the other characters in the novel? Do you do a lot of character development and thought about characters before you write, or is that kind of evolved? Like, do you just develop the characters as you're writing them, as you're drafting?
so I like my children make fun of me for this, but like everyone in my house makes fun of me for this. But like a lot of my writing time is just like thinking time. So it's not like I know there are those like exercises that some people will give you. Like if you took a writing
Yeah,
class, they would say like write a letter from your character to their mother, and like you know to come up with backstories in a more methodical way. But I just kind of sit and think a lot. It's just a lot of sitting and thinking, taking walks with the dog, thinking while I'm doing
yeah,
that, you know, thinking in the shower. Like in the shower is where I came up with Abby being a divorce lawyer. Like I was like, okay, she's going to be a lawyer and she's going to be cynical and love is going to elude her. But then I was like, wait, she's a divorce lawyer. That's the best because
perfect. Yeah, perfection. Yeah, yeah.
so like, and then, you know, I knew, well, why is she a divorce lawyer? Okay, well, you know, her parents had a terrible divorce. And then it's going to like all kind of click together from there. But I kind of, I don't outline it like the way some people might do. I just sort of but I think about it for a long time. That's why I'm such a slow writer. It's because I'm just trying to figure out my characters and who they are. But I'm pretty slow because of that. Because like I will have a writing day, but I don't write like more than a sentence because I'm just like
Processing and yeah, brainstorming. I totally get that, especially like the shower and going for walks or driving in my car. I've had to like
yeah,
pull over and like write something
yeah,
down. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the subconscious at work. So so you said we talked about this right before we jumped on the call, but you're not really a plotter, you're kind of a pantser, as that we talk about in writing. And so tell me about your process, like how it sounds like you write kind of freehand from the beginning and then map it out towards the end. Is that what you're
and I know what I want to happen. I know generally who my characters will be. I know how I want it to begin and I know how I want it to end. And I know certain like oops, did I lose you?
I was
Oh,
like,
there
that'll come back.
you
Okay.
go. Okay. Um, I know like certain I would say there are like these stopping points. Like if you mapped out a road trip, you would have like your places where you would stop to get food or stop to sleep or stop to like use the bathroom or whatever. And so that's what I have in a book. I have these stopping points. I don't write them down. I tend to just keep it in my head. But I have my dramatic scenes that I know that I want to hit. So maybe when I start writing, I have like 5 of them or something like that.
Okay,
As the story
interesting.
goes on, more of them pop up. And then, like, when I get to about 100 pages of a book, then I know I'm solidly in. And then I start to outline. And then I'm like, okay, I very loosely outline the second 2/3. When I
Okay.
get to 2/3 of the way, then I outline in a much more detailed way because I only have 100 pages or so left. So then, and then the closer I get, when I have 50 pages left, then I really outline because I know like I have to get certain things to happen.
Oh, to wrap up everything. Yeah, yeah. Tie everything
But I
together.
don't know. what those things are going to be yet exactly until I get there. So I kind of, I don't know. It's a weird, maybe that's weird, but that's that's sort of.
I think it's, it's so fascinating to me talking to different writers because everyone's process is so different and it's whatever works and it works for you, obviously. So yeah,
Well,
I
I mean, it sort of works. Sometimes it makes me insane, but
get it.
and so
I
maybe
think
that makes it work.
I think writing in general makes people insane though. So you're just gonna roll with it. So we were talking to before. I love this cover. I'm gonna hold it up again because it's so beautiful. And I'd love for you to talk about the symbolism and what it represents and how much you had to say in the design. And I know you have something to show too.
Yeah. So this cover I had
Camera
the
right.
most input on. Yeah, I have it too.
Okay, good.
But you have that cool, like yours actually, mine is backwards. But I had the most input on this cover. And so my editor was really wonderful, and I had a lot of thoughts, and she told me to start a Google Doc, and I put like in things that were inspiring me for the cover in the Google Doc. And what I felt very early on was that I wanted it to look like a ketubah. And for those who don't know, a ketubah is a Jewish marriage contract. And so I have my ketubah, which I took off the wall. We usually get them framed, and they're big, right? So this is like a big thing. It's like,
So
and
cool.
they're always like really highly decorated, and they're often floral, and they often have like symbols. There's all different kinds. And now, like, there are such cool ones now. If you look on Instagram, if you look for ketubahs on Instagram, there's beautiful ones. And it's just, I think ketubas actually are supposed to protect the women in the relationship. It's like the things that the husband's supposed to do. But yeah, it's interesting. But now the language in them is like has very modern language in it. But if you look at this one, it has like it has symbols in it, right? So it has, whoops, sorry.
Yeah.
There's a Torah there, there's a house, like there's a mezuzah, and there's a temple. So it's kind of like the things for a happy marriage. There's a tree, like the tree of life or the tree of family that you create. So it's like symbols to send you off with good luck and joy on your wedding day and all that sort of thing. So I wanted there to be things like that in mine. And of course, like the pickles, I specifically asked for. I was like,
Love
please,
it.
please, pickles. And then we have like the glasses, because there's a spectacle salesman in the story who figures really prominently, and his granddaughter is someone that Sarah knows and Abby knows also. And then there are wedding rings, of course, and a bracelet. The bracelet is different from the way it's described in the book. And then the very controversial bride and groom. And it's controversial because I actually didn't want the bride and groom.
Oh.
I'm like, I look at this book like this because I like, make it look too romancy. Maybe it doesn't make it look historical enough. Like, but they really love the bride and groom. So they're like, I mean, how could I really complain? Like, they did everything that I asked.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
And sort of like Tinkerbell swish
Oh, yeah. I love it. Yeah.
is, really shows like what Sarah's gift is. So I love the cover. It makes me really happy.
Yeah, gorgeous. It's one of my favorites I've seen in a while. I really love it. So was the Matchmaker's Gift always the title, or did you have a different title?
So because the way this book happened, like it was, I didn't even like, they wanted me to write this book and they told me to write it, and I didn't even have like a synopsis, a sentence, nothing. Like there was nothing except just, I'm gonna write a Matchmaker book. Like I don't know why anybody like wanted it. But early on, when you have to like announce, when you have a deal, they do the deal announcements in Publishers Marketplace or whatever. So the title that they wanted was the Matchmaker's Library. And I really liked that title, but I was a little worried about it just because like I didn't know what the library was, like
Yeah.
that article that my daughter's roommate showed me referenced a file cabinet, like a Matchmaker's file cabinet.
Okay.
Early on, I thought I think when I first told my agent about it, I was really into like thinking about the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil E. Frank.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, what if it was called like the mixed up files of, like some like Sarah, whatever. And she said, well, that sounds like a YA book, and I don't think that would be a good idea. But the idea of like a file cabinet that got like turned over and all the paperwork in it got like messed up was sort of like in my head. Like maybe they would make all wrong matches. Maybe that's how it would start or something. I don't know. Like I was just trying to sort of figure out what the story was. Um, so when they said the Matchmaker's Library, and then I sort of like picked the time period and I was like, well, I don't think there were really like file cabinets, although there probably were like wooden file cabinets in 1910. But then it became journals. I was like, well, it's sort of her own personal library. Like maybe
Yeah.
a collection of journals, but it's not like a library, like a building, a library. It's her own personal little collection of matches that she has made. So I was down with that title and I was like, okay, but then when I wrote the first draft, I think it was after I gave them the first draft, it's really a gift that she has, and her granddaughter has the gift too. And so like they said, you know what, like we think the Matchmaker's Gift is a much more fitting title. And then I really liked that also.
Yeah, that works because it works on a couple levels, like the gift of the journals and the gift that they had. Yeah, I love it. Really good.
It does make it sound a little more romancy though. That's the only danger. Like well, Matchmaker's Library sounds a little more historical than
Yeah.
Matchmaker's Gift. And so this book, like the thing I worry about a little with this book is like, will the historical people, the historical fiction lovers find it? Because it doesn't always come across as a historical novel, even though it is, So
Yeah.
I hope they all can find it.
Oh, I think they will. And I think that, yes, there's romance in it, but that is not the central relationship. That's not the central part of the story. It's like the romances are on the side and they're lovely and you weave them in, but it's really like a story about family and friends and it's particularly a granddaughter and grandmother story. So yeah, so keep that in mind. Historical fiction lovers will definitely love it. So I have a couple more questions, and then if anyone has questions, you can put it in the Q&A or the webinar chat, but I think that something's going on with the webinar chat. So put them in the Q&A, and I will take questions from the audience. So this is your third novel. Did you find this one easier or harder to write than your first?
Well, it certainly was quicker. I mean, my first one took me 5 years to write, and this I wrote like in less than a year. So it was quicker, but I don't know. I guess this one was easier. It got a little easier. The first one was really, really hard.
Yeah, yeah, for me too. But I think, I don't know if they're all hard for me, but I think I know the process at least. Like I have a process, and it's like you said with yours, like it's kind of quirky, but it works for me, and I guess that's good. So
I always say this. I feel like, I mean, I've never trained for a marathon, and I really don't think I ever will. But I feel like if you said to me, okay, you're going to train for a marathon, I would be like, there's no way I could possibly do it. I just couldn't. I'm just not in shape. I just couldn't do it. But then maybe I could. I don't know. Like if I really forced myself to, I could. And then the next time, like people tend to, like if they run a marathon, a lot of times people will run it more than once, like
that's true.
later they do it again because they realize that they can. So it's like the mental hurdle. Once you get over the mental hurdle of knowing that you can do something, and that's kind of how it is with writing a book. Like in the beginning, the idea of writing 300 pages is just so daunting. It's like there's no way I can ever do it. But once you do it, you're like, I guess I can. I guess it's just like 30 sessions of 10 pages each. Like I guess I can.
Yes.
You just break it down into these smaller, more manageable chunks, and you realize, okay, like I could do this.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I was talking to this book club the other night and I said, I just think about it as math. And I'm like, okay, I have to get to 100,000 words. How do I do that without losing my mind? 1,000 words, how many times? Yeah, it's just math. Yeah, yeah, very true.
Taken into smaller bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, yeah, completely. So one thing, I know there's some aspiring authors in the audience, and I always ask towards the end of the conversation, what's the best advice you can give to writers who are just starting out?
I mean, it's just, there's a couple things. One thing is to take a class and find a group. I wanted to write a story for 15 years and I never did because I didn't know how. And I took a class to help me. I took a class at Sarah Lawrence. And it was just like a class at 11 o'clock in the afternoon because that's when my kids were in school. And it was the time that fit. And then I found a community within that, class. So I think that that's really, really important. Because I think the most important thing is that you have to think of yourself as a writer. And that you feel like such an imposter at first. It's like, you write 2 pages and you're like, I'm a writer, but you don't feel like a writer and you don't want to tell anyone that you're a writer. But unless you kind of think of yourself that way and take yourself seriously that way, it's not going to happen. So you have to.
Yeah, that is excellent advice. Yeah, I always say like you have to start like if you really want it, you have to make the time for it and realize that it's, you know, it's valuable time and you have to give the time to it and own it and like you said, take it seriously and take yourself seriously. Yeah, completely agree. Um, tell us how people can keep in touch with you and if you want to share a little bit about what you're working on now. And then if anyone has questions, I'd love to take questions. There's a couple comments I'll read too.
So you can email me. You can go to my website, which is lyndacohenloigman.com. And that has my email, which is lyndacohenloigman@gmail.com, which is my full name at Gmail. And I'm on Instagram at @LLoigman, and I'm on Twitter. I don't know why. I really have to make the same thing. For some reason, my Twitter is different. It's Lynda C. Loigman. I don't know why. And I don't know how long Twitter will be around, but I'm on Twitter still. And I'm on Facebook too. So I do post a lot on Facebook still. And you can just look for Lynda Cohen Loigman author on Facebook. So, and I love to Zoom with book clubs. I need a little notice. So sometimes book clubs are like, can you Zoom with us tomorrow? So just give me a little notice if you can, and I'll look and I'll try to do it. December is getting pretty booked, but I'm happy to do it. And what else can I tell you? Oh, what I'm working on now. So
Yeah.
it's another sort of uplifting historical story that has another dash of magical realism in it. And it's sort of inspired by my husband's great grandmother, who was a pharmacist and graduated from pharmacy school in 1921. And I just think a pharmacy, so it takes place at a pharmacy in Brooklyn. But the story that I heard most about my husband's great grandmother was that she kept doctoring her certificates and her paperwork so that she was practicing till she was really old, because they always thought she was 10 years younger than she was. So she was
Amazing.
So the story is about a woman who, it's 2 timelines, but it's the same woman. It's like her when she's 80 and she's finally forced to retire because the jig is up, because they finally figure out that she's been lying all these years. And then it's her as a sort of coming into her own. But her father's a pharmacist, and she's kind of caught between her father's very strict adherence to exact measurements and science and the scientific stuff about medicine, and this relative that she have who's sort of concocting stuff in her kitchen,
right, like herbal remedies and things like that. Yeah.
So she has to sort of choose a side, what do you put your faith in?
Right. Interesting. Fascinating. Does that have a working title yet or not really?
It kind of has a working title, but I don't know if this will be the title, but it's kind of maybe going to be called The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern.
Nice.
Maybe.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Comments here. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A. Susan Seligman, who's so delightful and comes to all of these. And Susan, I'm glad you made it on tonight, because I saw a comment that you were trying to make your iPad work. Just wanted to say hi to both Lynda and Jane. Love all your books so much. Thank you. Thank you for sharing these stories. The Matchmaker's Gift is such a gift to your readers. The settings of the Lower East Side during the early 1900s and the city in the 1990s were so vivid and realistic. It brought me back to my time living there. The characters were empathetic and relatable, and I just love everything about this book. That's so sweet, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
And Debbie McBride says, loving this book, and I got it because of Historical Happy Hour. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. Yay. And Sharon, who's on often too. Thank you for coming, Sharon. I just received your book this week as an early Christmas present, and I can't wait to read it. Do you still get nervous doing live author events?
I don't ever get nervous doing author events. I think it's because, I used to be a lawyer. And when I was a lawyer, I was always nervous, always. And
really?
Yeah, I was always nervous that I was going to get something wrong, because I was a trust and estates lawyer, and I was so nervous about the tax law that I was going to get something wrong. And we used to have to do, every 6 months or every year, we used to have to do these seminars for accountants where we would speak on a topic, and it would be continuing education for accountants. And we would have to get up and talk, and they would ask us questions, and that was like the most terrifying thing. And
Yeah.
please don't ask me about the tax. Like, and the accountants were asking me, and they were so practical, and I was like, I didn't. Oh, it was awful. So like honestly, I always say, like, why should I be nervous? Like, I can't get anything wrong because I made it up. Like,
that's true.
So like, if I say it's right, then I think it's right. So I don't get.
Excellent. Yeah.
I love talking to readers. You know,
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, the audience is always warm and friendly, which is lovely. Yeah.
I really do always love it.
It's not all accountants. Yeah.
No, there's always something wacky that happens. I feel like, I don't know. Like when I go home, I'm from Western Massachusetts. So when I go home to like Western Massachusetts, like there are people in the audience who like I grew up with, or like my teachers, or like, you know, it's just.
Oh, that's the best. I love that. Yeah. I did a book club with one of my old teachers from high school and her friends the other night, and it was so great. Yeah.
So great.
So, okay. One more comment from Mindy, and wait a minute. Thanks for the wonderful discussion, Jane and Lynda. Love the Matchmaker's Gift. Thank you, Mindy, for coming on again. And as someone who grew up on the Lower East Side, I really enjoyed it. I love the story and the characters. And Susan said, thank you for reading my comment. Love you both. You guys are all so nice. I'm gonna wrap it up because I know you're not feeling well. Lynda came on tonight. She's a hero with a fever and everything else going on.
You have a bad back.
I have a bad back.
Person, like only one functioning person.
I know we're a hot mess tonight, but it was delightful as always to talk to you.
Imagine how great it would be if we were both feeling well.
I know, exactly. And we will hopefully we'll get together in 2023 in person. That would be so great. And so feel better. Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah, everyone. And this is a great gift. So buy it for either. All right. Good to see you. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.